Stay with me. Because what happened on that Christmas night didn't just ruin a marriage, it exposed a truth no one in that town was ready to see. The door slammed shut with a sharp crack that echoed across the quiet suburban street, louder than the distant carolers, louder than the soft hum of Christmas lights glowing along the rooftops. Emily Carter stood frozen on the front steps, her breath catching in the cold December air, one hand instinctively resting on her 8-month pregnant belly as if shielding the tiny life inside her from the shock she hadn't yet processed. Snow drifted down in slow, delicate flakes, landing on her hair, her coat, her lashes, but she didn't move. Behind the heavy oak door, laughter resumed almost instantly, low, careless, and far too warm for a night that had just turned her world to ice. A moment earlier, that door had been her home. Now it was a wall. Her suitcase followed seconds later, tossed onto the porch with a dull thud that felt heavier than it should have, like it carried more than clothes, like it carried everything she had believed about love. Emily blinked, once, twice, trying to steady her breathing, but the air felt thinner out here, sharper, like every inhale came with a warning. She turned slowly, her boots crunching against the thin layer of snow as she looked out across the quiet street lined with identical houses dressed in perfect holiday symmetry, wreaths, garlands, glowing reindeer on manicured lawns. It was the kind of neighborhood people drove through just to feel something. Tonight, it felt like a stage. And she was the only one not in on the script. Her phone buzzed faintly in her coat pocket, but she didn't reach for it. Not yet. Somewhere inside the house, a glass clinked. Music played. Life continued, just without her. Emily swallowed hard, her throat tight, her mind struggling to catch up to what had just happened, to the way Daniel's voice had sounded so final, so certain, like he had rehearsed it. Maybe he had. Maybe this night had been planned down to the last detail. The timing, the witnesses, the silence that followed. She shifted her weight slightly, wincing as a dull pressure spread across her lower back, the baby inside her responding to her rising heartbeat with a firm, insistent movement. "I'm okay," she whispered under her breath, though. She wasn't sure who she was trying to convince. A gust of wind swept down the street, cutting through her coat, making her pull it tighter around herself as she took a single step forward, then another, leaving faint footprints behind her on the untouched snow. Each step felt louder than it should have, like the night was listening. Like someone, somewhere, was already watching. And the truth was, Daniel Brooks had no idea. This wasn't the moment he thought it was. Not even close. Emily kept walking, even though she had no destination, even though every step felt like it carried her further away from something she had once called certain. The cold pressed in from every direction now, slipping past the edges of her coat, settling into her bones with a quiet persistence that matched the silence she carried inside her chest. Her boots moved slowly across the sidewalk, the soft crunch of snow beneath her feet becoming the only rhythm she could follow, the only proof that she was still moving forward. Behind her, the house glowed brighter than ever, golden light spilling through tall windows, silhouettes shifting inside as if nothing had changed, as if a life had not just been removed from its foundation and left out in the open air. She did not turn back. Not because she was strong, but because she already knew what she would see if she did. A door that would not open. A man who would not look at her the same way again. And a version of herself that no longer existed. Her phone buzzed again, longer this time, more insistent, and she finally reached into her pocket with trembling fingers, pulling it out just enough to glance at the screen. Daniel's name did not appear. There was no message. No apology. No hesitation. Just silence where something should have been. Emily let out a slow breath, watching it form a cloud in front of her before disappearing into the night, just like everything else that had once felt solid. A sudden cheer erupted from a nearby house, followed by the sound of children laughing, the unmistakable jingle of bells echoing faintly as a neighbor dressed as Santa Claus stepped onto a porch across the street, waving to a small crowd gathered below. The contrast hit harder than anything Daniel had said. Christmas was still happening. Joy was still moving forward. The world had not paused to acknowledge what had just ended. She stepped off the curb without thinking, crossing the empty street as her mind drifted somewhere between memory and disbelief, flashes of the past surfacing without warning. The first apartment they shared, small but filled with plans. The late nights when Daniel used to promise her that everything he built would be for them. The way he once held her hand like it meant something. Each memory arrived warm and left cold, like it had been rewritten by the man he had become. Emily tightened her grip around the handle of her suitcase, her other hand still resting protectively over her stomach as a firm movement from the baby grounded her again in the present. "I am here," she whispered softly, her voice nearly lost in the wind, but steady enough to hold on to. Another step. Then another. But this time, she felt it before she saw it. A shift. Subtle. Almost invisible. The kind of feeling that made the air around her seem heavier, like something had entered the space without announcing itself. Somewhere behind her, an engine idled quietly. Not loud. Not urgent. Just there. Waiting. Emily slowed, her breath catching slightly as she resisted the instinct to turn around too quickly, her eyes scanning the reflections in the frosted windows of a nearby storefront. A shape. Dark. Still. And closer than it should have been. Daniel Brooks was celebrating inside a house full of light, completely unaware that the night had already begun to change direction, and that somewhere just beyond his reach, a different kind of presence had stepped into the story he thought he controlled. Emily did not turn around right away because something in her instincts told her that whatever was behind her was not meant to be rushed, not meant to be startled, but understood. Her breath slowed, visible in the cold air as she stood still for just a second longer than comfort allowed, her fingers tightening slightly around the handle of her suitcase while her other hand pressed gently against her stomach as if anchoring herself to something real. The quiet engine behind her continued to idle, steady and controlled, not the careless rumble of a passing car but something deliberate, something that waited instead of moved. She swallowed and finally turned, slowly, carefully, her eyes adjusting to the dim light reflecting off the snow until the shape became clearer. It was a large black SUV, polished even under the soft glow of streetlights, its presence out of place in a neighborhood where everything was meant to look the same. The windows were tinted, concealing whoever sat inside, but the driver's door opened before she could take another step, the sound precise, almost rehearsed. A man stepped out, dressed in a dark coat tailored too perfectly to be casual, his posture straight, his movements measured, like someone who understood control in a way that did not need to be explained. He did not speak immediately. Instead, he walked around the front of the vehicle, his shoes pressing into the snow with quiet confidence, each step unhurried, each movement intentional. Emily felt her heartbeat shift, not faster, but deeper, like her body was recognizing something before her mind could catch up. The man stopped a few feet away from her, not too close, not distant either, just enough to acknowledge her presence without overwhelming it. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice calm, respectful, but certain in a way that made it clear he already knew exactly who she was. Emily blinked, caught off guard not by the name itself, but by the way he said it, like it carried more weight than she had been allowed to feel in a very long time. "Yes," she answered softly, her voice steady despite the confusion rising beneath it. The man nodded once, then glanced briefly toward the SUV before returning his attention to her. "Someone has been trying to reach you," he continued, his tone unchanged, but the words landing with a quiet significance that settled into the air between them. Emily hesitated, her mind immediately searching for a name, a reason, anything that could make sense of this moment, but nothing fit. No one from her current life would send someone like this. No one from Daniel's world would address her with that kind of respect. The man reached into his coat, not abruptly, not in a way that suggested urgency, but with the same controlled precision he had shown in every movement so far, and pulled out a small, neatly folded piece of paper. He held it out to her, not forcing it into her hand, simply offering it as if the decision still belonged to her. Emily looked at it for a second before taking it, her fingers brushing against the edge as a strange familiarity crept in, something she could not place yet but could not ignore either. She unfolded it slowly, her breath catching just slightly as her eyes moved across the short, handwritten message. There were only a few words, but they were enough. "We finally found you." Emily's heart skipped, not from fear, but from recognition that had no immediate explanation. She looked up at the man again, her voice quieter now, almost uncertain. "Who is looking for me?" The man held her gaze, his expression unchanged, but something in his eyes softened just enough to suggest that whatever answer he carried was not simple. He glanced past her, toward the direction of the brightly lit house she had just left, then back at her, and spoke with a calm certainty that shifted everything. "Your father." Somewhere in the distance, a bell rang again, soft and distant, but this time it did not sound like celebration. It sounded like something arriving. The word did not land all at once. It echoed instead, slow and deliberate, like it needed time to settle into a place that had been empty for too long. Emily stood there, the paper still trembling slightly in her hand, her eyes fixed on the man in front of her, as if he had just spoken a language she used to understand but had not heard in years. "My father?" she repeated quietly, not as a question for him, but as a test for herself, as if saying it out loud might make it feel real or prove that it could not be. The man nodded once, calm, patient, as though he had expected that exact reaction. Snow continued to fall between them, soft and silent, covering the footprints Emily had just made, erasing the path behind her 1 inch at a time. "He has been looking for you for a very long time," the man said, his voice steady, but now carrying something deeper, something that felt less like information and more like history. Emily's fingers tightened around the note, her mind pulling at fragments she had not touched in years, pieces of a past she had folded away carefully, deliberately, so that it would not interfere with the life she had chosen. A life she had believed in. A life she had just been removed from. "That is not possible," she said after a moment, her voice still soft but firmer now, grounded in what she thought she knew. "My father is—" She stopped herself before finishing the sentence, because even she was not sure how to define him anymore. Absent? Gone? Irrelevant? The man did not interrupt. He simply waited, giving her space to confront the thought fully. "I was told he left," she continued, her gaze drifting slightly past him, not seeing the street anymore but something much further back. "A long time ago." The man's expression shifted just enough to acknowledge her words, but not enough to agree with them. "You were told many things," he replied carefully, "but not all of them were true." The air seemed to still around them, like the night itself was leaning in closer, listening. Emily felt her heartbeat pick up again, not from fear, but from the quiet realization that something she had accepted as final might not have been final at all. "Where is he?" she asked, the question coming out more quickly than she expected, as if it had been waiting beneath the surface all along. The man glanced toward the SUV again, then back at her, and for the first time, there was a subtle shift in his posture, a slight straightening, as though what came next carried weight beyond the moment. "He is close," he said. "Closer than you think." Emily followed his gaze instinctively, her eyes moving past the vehicle, past the line of houses, until something at the far end of the street caught her attention. A figure, dressed in red, standing near the edge of a small gathering where children laughed, and pointed toward a familiar silhouette that belonged in every Christmas scene. Santa Claus. But there was something different about the way this one stood. Still. Grounded. Not performing, not waving, not playing a role for the crowd. Just watching. Emily's breath caught again, this time sharper, as a strange sense of recognition brushed against her, something she could not explain but could not ignore. The man beside her spoke once more, quieter now, but with a certainty that removed any remaining doubt. "He never stopped looking for you." And across the street, the man in the red suit began to walk toward her, each step slow, deliberate, and impossible to dismiss. Emily could not move at first, not because she was afraid, but because something deeper held her in place, something that felt like recognition trying to surface through years of silence. The figure in red stepped closer, the soft crunch of snow beneath his boots marking each step with quiet certainty, and with every inch he closed the distance, the noise of the nearby crowd faded into something distant, something unimportant. The children who had been laughing moments ago now seemed like part of another world, their voices muffled, their excitement no longer reaching her. All she could see was him. The red coat. The white beard. The gloved hands. And yet none of it felt like a costume anymore. It felt like a cover. Her breath slowed, her fingers loosening slightly around the folded note as the man approached until he stood just a few feet away from her, close enough that she could see the way his eyes held steady on her face, not scanning, not questioning, but knowing. He did not speak immediately. He simply looked at her, as if confirming something he had waited a lifetime to see. Emily felt her chest tighten, not painfully, but with a pressure that came from somewhere deeper than logic, something tied to memory, to a feeling she had once known without needing to understand it. "Emily," he said finally, her name spoken with a quiet gravity that did not belong to strangers, a tone that carried familiarity without asking permission for it. The sound of it settled over her, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just that single word. She blinked, her voice barely above a whisper when she answered, "Do I know you?" It was the only question she could find, the only one that made sense in a moment that did not. The man exhaled slowly, a faint cloud forming in the cold air, and then, with careful hands, he reached up to the edge of the white beard. The movement was unhurried, deliberate, as if he understood the weight of what he was about to reveal and refused to rush it. Emily's heartbeat rose, steady but undeniable, her body responding before her mind could fully process what was happening. The beard came away first, revealing a face beneath it that did not match the character the neighborhood expected, a face older than her. Memories but unmistakably real, lined with time yet firm with presence. Then the hat. Then the final pieces of disguise removed one by one until there was nothing left to hide behind. The man standing in front of her was no longer part of a holiday scene. He was something else entirely. Something real. Emily's lips parted slightly, her breath catching as her eyes searched his face, tracing features that felt both unfamiliar and deeply known at the same time. And then it happened. Not all at once, but in fragments. A memory of a voice from long ago. A feeling of being lifted into the air as a child. A name she had not spoken in years. "William," she said softly, the word forming before she could stop it, before she could question it. The man's expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough to reveal something he had been holding back, something that broke through the controlled exterior he had maintained until now. "I was not allowed to come back," he said quietly, his voice steady but edged with something that sounded like truth finally being released. "But I never left you." The sentence settled into the space between them, heavy and undeniable. Emily felt her eyes burn slightly, not from the cold, but from the realization that everything she had believed about her past might not have been the whole story. Behind her, somewhere far away, a door opened again, laughter spilling out into the night, unaware that just a few houses down, a different kind of reunion had begun, one that would not stay hidden for long. Emily felt the world shift beneath her feet, not in a way that made her fall, but in a way that made everything she had once stood on feel uncertain, like the ground itself had been replaced without warning. She stared at William, her mind trying to catch up to what her heart had already begun to recognize, the years of absence collapsing into a single moment that refused to be simple. "You never left?" she repeated quietly, her voice carrying both disbelief and something else, something closer to hope but not ready to be trusted yet. William did not step closer, did not reach for her, as if he understood that this distance was not physical but emotional, something that could not be crossed without permission. "I was kept away," he said, his tone calm but firm, each word placed carefully, as though he had rehearsed this explanation 1,000 times but never had the chance to say it out loud. "There were decisions made for you. For your life. And I was not part of them." Emily shook her head slightly, her breath uneven now, not from the cold, but from the pressure of everything she was trying to process at once. "I was told you walked away," she said, her eyes searching his, looking for any sign that this was not another version of the truth she had already been given before. William held her gaze without hesitation. "I would have never walked away from you," he replied, and there was no hesitation in his voice, no uncertainty, only a quiet certainty that made it harder to doubt than anything she had heard before. The wind picked up again, swirling the snow around them, but neither of them moved, as if the moment demanded stillness. Emily's hand pressed more firmly against her stomach, grounding herself as another small movement from the baby reminded her that this was not just about the past anymore. "Why now?" she asked, the question coming out sharper than she intended, but necessary. "Why find me now?" William's expression softened, not with weakness, but with something that looked like regret held in control for too long. "Because now, no one can stop me," he said simply. The answer hung in the air, heavier than the snow that continued to fall. Emily exhaled slowly, her thoughts racing, connecting pieces she had never thought to question before. The way her life had always seemed directed, guided by expectations she never fully understood. The way certain opportunities appeared and disappeared without explanation. The way she had been encouraged, almost pushed, into a life that now stood behind her as a closed door. "Daniel," she said, almost to herself, the name feeling different now, smaller somehow. William's eyes shifted briefly toward the house in the distance, the glow of its lights still visible, still untouched by the truth unfolding just steps away. "He does not know who you are," William said, his voice steady again, but now carrying an edge of something else, something controlled but unmistakable. Emily looked back at him, confusion mixing with realization. "Who I am?" she asked. William held her gaze, and for the first time, there was no hesitation in what he revealed. "You are not the woman he thought he could leave behind," he said. "And he is about to understand exactly what that means." Somewhere behind them, the black SUV's engine grew quieter, as if it had been waiting for this exact moment to arrive, and in the reflection of its dark surface, Emily caught a glimpse of herself, standing between two worlds, one she had just lost and one she had never truly known, and for the first time that night, the cold did not feel like the only thing surrounding her. Emily did not realize she had stopped breathing until the silence between them stretched too long, until the cold air forced its way back into her lungs and reminded her that this moment was real, that everything he was saying was not just words meant to comfort her but something far more permanent. She looked at William again, really looked this time, past the years, past the absence, searching for proof not in what he said but in how he stood, how he waited, how he did not rush her into believing anything she was not ready to accept. And that was when it shifted. Not outside, not in the falling snow or the quiet street, but inside her. A small, almost invisible shift, like something locked had finally loosened. "If that is true," she said slowly, her voice steadier now, "then why did no one tell me?" It was not anger yet, but it was close. William exhaled quietly, his gaze lowering for just a fraction of a second before returning to hers. "Because the version of your life they built depended on you not knowing," he said. The words landed differently this time. Not confusing. Not distant. Clear. Too clear. Emily's grip tightened on the handle of her suitcase again, but this time it was not out of uncertainty. It was grounding. Anchoring. "They," she repeated, the single word carrying more weight than anything else. "Who are they?" William did not answer immediately, and that hesitation said more than any explanation could have. He turned slightly, gesturing toward the SUV, and in that subtle motion, the man in the dark coat stepped back, opening the rear door without a word, as if this moment had already been decided long before Emily ever stepped out into the snow. "You deserve to hear everything," William said, his voice softer now but no less certain. "But not out here." Emily followed his gaze to the open car door, the warm interior light spilling out onto the snow, creating a sharp contrast against the cold blue of the night. For a moment she did not move. Not because she was afraid to go, but because she understood what stepping into that car meant. It meant leaving behind the last piece of the life she had tried to hold together. It meant accepting that what she had just lost might not have been what she thought it was. Behind her, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of a door opening again. Laughter. Music. The life she had been pushed out of continued without pause, without consequence, without even noticing her absence. Emily closed her eyes briefly, just long enough to let that reality settle, then opened them again with something new in her expression. Not certainty. Not yet. But clarity. She turned back to William, studying his face one more time, searching for any reason to doubt him, any hesitation, any sign that this was not what it seemed. She found none. Only patience. Only presence. Only truth waiting to be accepted. The baby moved again, a small, steady reminder that she was not alone, that whatever choice she made now would shape more than just her own future. Emily nodded once, a quiet, decisive motion, and stepped forward. The snow shifted beneath her feet as she moved toward the open door, each step lighter than the last, as if something that had been weighing her down was no longer there. As she reached the car, she paused for just a second, her hand resting against the door frame, and glanced back over her shoulder one final time. The house still glowed. The lights still shimmered. But it felt distant now. Smaller. Like something she had already outgrown without realizing it. She slid into the seat, the warmth surrounding her instantly, a stark contrast to the cold she had just left behind, and as the door closed softly, sealing her inside, the world outside seemed to shift in response. William followed, taking his place beside her, and the man in the front seat closed his door with the same quiet precision as before. The engine hummed deepened slightly, no longer idle. No longer waiting. And somewhere in the distance, inside a house full of light and laughter, Daniel Brooks raised a glass, completely unaware that the night he thought he controlled had already moved beyond him, and that the woman he had just dismissed was no longer standing in the cold. The door closed with a soft, final sound that felt louder than anything that had happened outside, sealing Emily into a space that was warm, controlled, and impossibly quiet compared to the night she had just stepped out of. For a moment, she did not speak. She simply sat there, her hands resting in her lap, her breath slowly adjusting to the temperature, to the stillness, to the presence of the man beside her who had just re-entered her life, as if he had never truly left it. The interior of the SUV smelled faintly of leather and something subtle, something clean, nothing like the artificial scents she had grown used to in Daniel's world. This felt different. Intentional. Real. Across from her, a small screen glowed softly, displaying quiet movement, numbers, locations, information she did not yet understand but could feel was connected to something larger. The driver spoke first, his voice low and respectful. "We are clear." William nodded once, then turned his attention fully to Emily, as if the outside world had already been handled, already placed exactly where it needed to be. "You are safe here," he said, not as reassurance, but as a statement of fact. Emily let out a slow breath, her fingers instinctively brushing against her stomach as the baby shifted again, calmer now, as if sensing the change in environment. "I do not understand any of this," she admitted, her voice steady but honest, no longer trying to hide the confusion that had been building inside her since the moment the door had closed behind her. "Then I will explain everything," William replied, his tone unchanged, grounded, as if he had been waiting for this moment longer than she could imagine. He reached forward slightly, tapping the screen in front of them, and it responded instantly, shifting to a series of documents, names, timelines, each one appearing with quiet precision. Emily leaned forward just enough to see, her eyes scanning the information, trying to make sense of it, trying to find something familiar in a world that suddenly felt entirely unfamiliar. "This is your life," William said, and the words made her pause. Not because of what they meant, but because of how they were said. Not past. Not history. Present. Ongoing. The screen displayed records she had never seen before. Accounts in her name. Trusts. Legal documents. Photos from years she did not remember being recorded. Emily's breath caught slightly as she noticed something else. Dates. Timelines that overlapped with moments she thought she understood. "This cannot be right," she said quietly, her eyes narrowing slightly as she pointed to a section that made no sense. "I was working 2 jobs during this time." I was barely getting by. William watched her carefully, not interrupting, letting her process it piece by piece. You were never meant to struggle, he said. That was arranged. The words landed with a quiet force that made her sit back slightly, her mind racing to connect what she had lived through with what she was now being shown. Arranged by who? She asked, her voice sharper now, the first edge of something stronger breaking through. William held her gaze, his expression steady, but now there was something else beneath it. Something controlled. The same people who made sure I stayed away, he said. Silence followed, heavier than before, filled with questions that had not yet been asked but were already forming. The car began to move, smooth and controlled, the outside world slipping past the tinted windows without drawing attention, without interruption. Emily looked down at her hands, then back at the screen, then finally at William, and for the first time since stepping into the car, her voice carried something new. Not confusion. Not disbelief. But realization. Daniel did not just leave me, she said slowly. He was part of it, was he not? William did not answer immediately, and that silence told her more than any confirmation could. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the street, the house, the footprints she had left behind, as if erasing the version of her life that had existed just an hour ago, and inside the moving car, Emily Carter began to understand that what she had lost was not just a marriage, but a carefully constructed illusion that was finally starting to break. The silence inside the car did not feel empty anymore. It felt full, heavy with meaning, with connections forming faster than Emily could follow, each one pulling her further away from the life she thought she understood and deeper into something that had been hidden in plain sight. She did not look away from William this time. She held his gaze, searching not for comfort, but for confirmation. He knew, she said, her voice low but steady, the realization settling into her like something inevitable. Daniel knew exactly who I was not. William did not rush to answer, but the slight shift in his expression, the tightening around his eyes, was enough to tell her she was not wrong. He knew enough. William replied carefully, his tone controlled, but no longer neutral. Enough to believe you had no protection. Enough to think there would be no consequences. Emily let out a slow breath, her fingers curling slightly as she absorbed that, as she replayed moments in her mind with a new perspective. The late nights. The sudden changes in his behavior. The way he had stopped pretending near the end, as if he had already calculated the outcome. So this was not just about him leaving, she continued, her voice gaining strength with every word. It was planned. William nodded once, not denying it, not softening it. You were placed in a position where walking away would seem like your only option, he said. And tonight, he believed you had reached that point. Emily looked down at her hands again, but this time she saw them differently. Not as someone abandoned. Not as someone powerless. But as someone who had been underestimated. The baby moved again, steady and present, and she pressed her hand gently against her stomach, grounding herself in what mattered now, not what had already been taken from her. Then what happens next? She asked, lifting her eyes back to William, her voice calm, but carrying a new kind of weight. William leaned back slightly, his posture relaxed but intentional, as if he had been waiting for that exact question. No, he said. We correct what was allowed to happen. The screen in front of them shifted again, new information appearing with quiet precision. Company structures. Ownership percentages. Legal filings. Names connected to Daniel's business that Emily had never paid attention to before. Daniel Brooks built his image on borrowed ground, William continued. Access he did not earn. Partnerships he did not fully understand. Emily leaned forward again, her eyes scanning the details, this time not with confusion, but with focus. And all of this, she said slowly, her voice trailing as she recognized something she had missed before. Her name. Not hidden. Not small. Present. Embedded in structures she had never been told about. William watched her carefully as she reached that point on her own. You were never outside of this, he said. You were at the center of it. The car turned smoothly onto a wider road, the lights of the neighborhood fading behind them, replaced by open space and distant city glow. Emily sat back, her mind no longer racing, but aligning, pieces falling into place with a clarity that felt almost unsettling. "He thought he was removing me," she said quietly. "But he removed himself." William did not smile, but there was a subtle shift in his expression that acknowledged the truth of that statement. "Exactly." The word landed with quiet finality. Outside, the snow continued to fall, but inside the car, something had changed completely. Emily Carter was no longer trying to understand what she had lost. She was beginning to understand what had always been hers, and somewhere far behind them, in a house still filled with light and celebration, Daniel Brooks had no idea that the foundation beneath him had already begun to shift. The car moved steadily through the quiet roads, the city lights ahead growing clearer with every mile. But inside, time felt slower, heavier, as if each second carried more meaning than the last. Emily sat still, her eyes no longer scanning the screen but fixed on something deeper, something internal that had finally begun to settle into place. She was not overwhelmed anymore. She was not confused. She was thinking. Carefully. Precisely. The kind of thinking that did not come from panic, but from clarity. "If everything you are saying is true," she began, her voice calm and controlled, "then tonight was not an ending." William turned slightly toward her, his attention immediate, as if he recognized the shift in her tone. "No," he said quietly. "It was a beginning." The words did not feel dramatic. They felt accurate. Emily nodded once, absorbing that, then glanced back at the screen where Daniel's world was laid out in structured detail, no longer distant, no longer protected. "He believes I am gone," she said, more to herself than to William. "That I will disappear quietly. That I will accept it." William did not interrupt. He let her continue, understanding that this realization needed to form on its own. "He chose tonight because it made him feel untouchable," she added, her eyes narrowing slightly as she replayed the scene in her mind, not with pain, but with perspective. "Public enough to humiliate. Private enough to control the narrative." The car slowed slightly as it approached a wide intersection, the city skyline now stretching across the horizon, lights reflecting off the snow-covered streets. William leaned forward just enough to tap the screen again, bringing up a new set of documents, more detailed, more immediate. "He is already celebrating," he said. "He believes the situation is resolved." Emily let out a quiet breath, almost something close to a short, humorless laugh, not out of amusement, but out of recognition. "Of course he is," she said. "That is exactly what he would do." The baby moved again, steady and calm, and this time, Emily did not react with uncertainty. She placed her hand over her stomach with quiet assurance, grounding herself not in fear, but in purpose. "Then we do not correct this quietly," she said, lifting her eyes back to William, her voice firm now, no hesitation left. "We let him see it." William studied her for a moment, not questioning her, but measuring the certainty behind her words. "You understand what that means?" he said. Emily nodded. "It means he does not get to pretend this never happened," she replied. "It means he does not get to decide how this story ends." The car came to a smooth stop at the light, the red glow reflecting briefly across the interior, casting a sharp contrast against the calm expressions inside. Outside, the world continued as it always did, unaware of the shift happening within the quiet space of the vehicle. William leaned back slightly, his expression settling into something that resembled approval, not spoken, but understood. "Then we move forward," he said simply. The light turned green. The car continued. And in that moment, something irreversible took shape. Emily Carter was no longer reacting to what had been done to her. She was deciding what would happen next. Somewhere behind them, in a house filled with warmth and noise, Daniel Brooks raised another glass, surrounded by people who believed the night had gone. Exactly as planned, completely unaware that the version of the future he had just secured was already unraveling, not with chaos, not with noise, but with something far more dangerous. precision. The city rose around them in layers of light and glass, the quiet suburban streets now replaced by towering buildings that reflected the night like polished mirrors, each window glowing with its own story, its own illusion of control. Inside the car, nothing felt rushed, nothing felt uncertain, and that contrast made everything Emily had just left behind seem even smaller, even more fragile than she had realized. The vehicle turned smoothly into a private entrance beneath one of the tallest buildings, the kind of place that did not need signs because the people who belonged there already knew where to go. The gate opened without pause. No questions. No delay. Just recognition. Emily noticed that immediately. Not because of what it was, but because of what it meant. Access like this was not given. It was owned. The car descended into a quiet underground space where everything was clean, controlled, and precisely arranged, the kind of environment that did not tolerate unpredictability. The engine came to a soft stop, and for a brief moment, no one moved. Then the driver stepped out, opening Emily's door with the same quiet respect as before, the warm interior giving way to the cool air of the structure, though it did not carry the same bite as the street she had stood on earlier. Emily stepped out carefully, one hand instinctively supporting her balance, her other still resting against her stomach, her movements slower but no longer uncertain. William joined her moments later, his presence steady, grounding, not leading her, but standing beside her as if to make it clear that she was not being brought somewhere. She was returning. They moved toward a private elevator, its doors already open, waiting. No buttons pressed. No hesitation. The moment they stepped inside, the doors closed smoothly, sealing them into another quiet space, this one even more insulated from the outside world. The elevator began to rise, the motion so smooth it was almost imperceptible, but the numbers changing above the door told the story clearly. Higher. Floor after floor. Each one placing more distance between Emily and the life she had just walked away from. This building, she said quietly, her voice thoughtful. Now, not questioning, but observing. It is yours. William glanced at her, a faint acknowledgement in his expression. It is one of many, he replied simply. Emily let that settle without reacting, because for the first time, statements like that did not feel impossible. They felt like pieces of a reality she had not been allowed to see. The elevator slowed, then stopped, the doors opening to reveal a space that did not resemble an office or an apartment, but something in between, something designed with intention, with control, with quiet authority. Large windows stretched across the far wall, overlooking the city, the lights below appearing almost distant, almost irrelevant from this height. Emily stepped forward slowly, her eyes taking it in, not with awe, but with understanding. This was not just wealth. This was structure. Power that did not need to announce itself. Behind her, the doors closed again, leaving her in a space that felt completely removed from everything she had known just hours ago. William walked ahead slightly, then turned back to face her, his expression calm but focused. Everything you saw in that car, he said, is only a fraction. Emily met his gaze, her posture straightening slightly, not out of tension, but out of readiness. Then show me the rest, she replied, her voice steady, clear, and completely different from the one that had stood outside in the snow. Somewhere far below, in a house still filled with light and celebration, Daniel Brooks checked his phone briefly, frowning for just a second at something he did not understand, before dismissing it and returning to the moment he believed belonged to him, unaware that far above the city, the woman he thought he had removed from his life was no longer standing outside his door, but stepping into a world he had never truly seen, and one that was about to see him very clearly. Emily stepped further into the space, her footsteps soft against the polished floor, each movement measured as her eyes adjusted to the scale of what surrounded her. It was not overwhelming in the way she might have expected. There were no loud displays, no unnecessary details. Everything was intentional, precise, designed for function rather than impression, and that alone told her more than anything else could have. This was not about showing power. This was about controlling it. The large screen along the far wall came to life without being touched, responding to their presence as if it had been waiting, displaying layers of information that shifted and organized themselves in real time. Names, companies, financial structures, legal networks, all interconnected in ways that made it impossible to view them as separate pieces. Emily slowed as she approached, her eyes narrowing slightly, not from confusion, but from focus. She recognized some of the names now. Not from memory, but from the fragments she had seen earlier in the car. Daniel's company appeared among them, smaller than she had ever imagined it, positioned within a network that made it look less like a center and more like a dependency. "He was never independent," she said quietly, her voice carrying a calm certainty that had not existed before. William stood a few steps behind her, watching her process everything without interruption. "No," he replied. "He was supported." Emily's gaze moved across the screen, following the lines, the connections, until one detail made her pause. A contract. Dated years ago. Long before she met Daniel. Her name appeared again, not as a participant, but as a condition. She leaned closer, her breath steady, her mind aligning the timeline with what she had lived through. "He was selected," she said slowly, the realization forming clearly now. "Not by me." William did not move, but there was a quiet confirmation in his silence. Emily exhaled, her hand resting briefly against her stomach as the weight of that truth settled fully. The relationship she had believed in had not been built naturally. It had been placed. Structured. Designed with an outcome she had never been meant to question. "And tonight," she continued, her voice still calm but sharper now, "he thought he was finishing what was started." William stepped forward slightly this time, closing the distance between them, not to guide her, but to stand beside her as an equal in the moment she was stepping into. "He believed he had reached the final step," he said. Emily turned to face him, her expression no longer uncertain, no longer searching. It was clear. Focused. Controlled. "Then we show him he never understood the first one," she replied. The screen shifted again, responding to her movement, highlighting sections of the structure that connected directly to Daniel's operations, his assets, his public image. Everything that could be seen. Everything that could be questioned. Everything that could be removed without force, without noise, without warning. Precision. Emily studied it for a moment longer, then reached out, not hesitantly, but with intention, selecting a single point on the display. The system responded instantly, expanding the data, exposing layers that had remained hidden until now. William watched her closely, not intervening, not directing. This was no longer about revealing the truth to her. It was about what she chose to do with it. "He wanted control," Emily said quietly, her voice steady, almost reflective. "Now he gets clarity." The city lights beyond the glass continued to flicker below, distant and unaware, while inside the room, a different kind of shift took place, one that did not require announcement, one that did not need an audience. Somewhere far below, Daniel Brooks glanced at his phone again, this time lingering slightly longer, a small crease forming between his brows as unfamiliar notifications appeared, subtle at first, easy to dismiss, but persistent enough to be noticed. He looked up, the room around him still filled with laughter, still unchanged, but something in his expression shifted, just slightly, as if a question had entered his mind that he could not yet answer. And far above him, Emily Carter stood in front of a system that had always known her name, no longer the woman who had been left behind, but the one who now decided what would remain. Emily did not rush her next move because for the first time that night, nothing required urgency, nothing demanded reaction, everything responded to intention instead. Her finger rested lightly above the interface, the system waiting, not prompting, not guiding, simply ready. She could feel it now, not just the structure on the screen, but the weight of what it represented, years of decisions made without her, paths shaped around her, a life directed from a distance while she believed she was choosing it freely. And yet, standing here, none of that felt like loss anymore. It felt like context. "If I do this," she said quietly, her eyes still on the display, "there is no version of his world that stays the same." William stood beside her, his presence steady, unshaken, not as someone leading, but as someone who had been waiting for her to reach this exact point. "There never was," he replied. Emily exhaled slowly, her hand pressing gently against her stomach as the baby moved again, not restless, not uncertain, just present, a quiet reminder that the future she was stepping into was not hers alone. She lowered her hand slightly, then made a single, deliberate selection. The system responded instantly, not with noise, not with alarm, but with quiet execution. Data shifted. Connections updated. Authorizations changed. Not removed, not destroyed, but restructured, as if something that had been incorrectly placed was finally being corrected. Emily watched it happen without flinching, without hesitation, her expression calm, focused, grounded in something deeper than emotion. This was not revenge. This was alignment. Far below, in a room still filled with laughter, Daniel Brooks felt it before he understood it. A pause in conversation. A message that did not match expectation. Another notification, then another, each one small on its own, easy to dismiss, but together forming a pattern he could not ignore. He glanced at his phone again, this time longer, his smile fading slightly as unfamiliar alerts replaced the certainty he had been celebrating just moments ago. Around him, nothing had changed. The lights still glowed. The music still played. The people still laughed. But something inside his expression shifted, subtle but undeniable, as if the ground beneath him had moved just enough to be noticed. He looked up, scanning the room, as if searching for a reason, a cause, something visible that could explain what he was beginning to feel. There was nothing. Because what had changed was not in front of him. It was above him. In a quiet room overlooking the city, Emily stepped back from the screen, her decision already complete, her posture relaxed, her breathing steady, not because the moment was over, but because it had only just begun. She turned slightly, her eyes moving toward the glass wall, the city stretching endlessly below, lights flickering like distant signals, each one unaware of the shift that had just taken place. William watched her for a moment, then followed her gaze, saying nothing, because nothing needed to be said. The outcome was already in motion. Emily rested her hand once more against her stomach, her expression softening just slightly, not with relief, not with victory, but with understanding. The version of herself who had stood in the snow was already gone. Not erased. Transformed. And somewhere far below, Daniel Brooks checked his phone one more time, his expression tightening as the realization finally began to form, too late to stop, too precise to reverse, that the woman he thought he had left behind had never truly been his to lose. Some men close doors thinking the story ends there. They do not realize, they have just locked themselves out of something they were never meant to control.